So a government shutdown has now been officially averted. We have what's called a 45-day funding bill. It's kind of like a clean funding bill. And basically what that means is you keep spending levels the same and you just extend it, right? Now, there's one change, which we'll get to in a second. It's about Ukraine. So basically it's like, let's just keep the funding levels the same, continue for 45 days, but also strip out the funding for Ukraine. That was basically the deal that was done. Now, having said all that, I think it's crystal clear that this is the best possible deal that Democrats could have gotten, given that Republicans control the House. Now, why? Why did they get this deal? Because there is insane infighting on the right, and they're basically going to war with each other. Of course, I'm talking about the Matt Gaetz faction versus the Kevin McCarthy faction. So first, I'll tell you about what ended up passing. Then I'll give you the backstory of how this came about, because they were trying to be more ambitious on the far right and like strip all of this social safety net spending and really gut the government down to the bone. But since there was so much infighting, that backfired, and you had to have moderate Republicans work with Democrats in order to get anything through. Okay, and by the way, they got this through with like 3 hours remaining. So here's what they say in NBC. With just hours to spare, House Republicans and Democrats on Saturday struck a surprise deal to fund the government and avert a shutdown that would have inflicted economic pain on millions of American families. The House voted on an overwhelming bipartisan basis, 335 to 91, for a short-term funding bill known as a continuing resolution, CR 209, continuing resolution or CR. 209 Democrats and 126 Republicans voted yes. Those are huge numbers, guys. While 90 Republicans voted no, and just one Democrat, Representative Mike Quigley of Illinois, voted no. And the reason that guy voted no is over the lack of Ukraine aid. Quote, "It was tough, but we got it through," Speaker Kevin McCarthy said after the vote. The bill now heads to the Senate, where lawmakers there say they will not object to a speedy vote. That vote is expected to take place in the next few hours after Senate Democrats meet. So by the way, as of now, as of the recording of this has been passed through the Senate, and it has been signed by Joe Biden. The stunning deal came together after McCarthy reversed course and put a so-called clean 45-day CR on the floor with billions in disaster aid, but none of the new Ukraine aid in a separate Senate deal, after insisting for days that any short-term funding bill would need to include deep spending cuts and tough border security measures. All right, so now the reason I tell you this is like a big win for Democrats is because this continuing resolution had no deep spending cuts and no tough border security measures. It was just a continuation of the previous funding with stripping out the Ukraine aid. Okay, so now let me tell you what happened just before this, which fell through, which is why McCarthy needed to rely on help from Democrats to get anything through. So Jeff Stein says, looks like a bunch of vulnerable House Republicans are going to have just voted for 30% cuts to hundreds of domestic programs, only for the bill to fail anyway by a wide margin. And even if the bill had passed in the House, it would still be DOA, dead on arrival, anyway, in the Senate. So this was the vote for the deep spending cuts version, the far-right version of a spending bill. You had 181 Republicans vote yes, 14 voted no, and you have 280 Democrats vote, or 208, did I say 280? 208 Democrats vote no. So in total, you only had 181 yes votes and 222 no votes. So what did this bill include? Well, Jeff Stein laid it out here for us. It was a cut of at least 30% to all of these things. Housing subsidies for poor people, medical research for cancer, the Social Security Administration offices, nutrition aid for pregnant moms. That's what's called the WIC program. They were going to gut that. I think that was up to 70% for that one. Head Start they were going to cut. EPA, NASA, Justice Department. I don't know what LIHEAP, LIHEAP, I don't know what that is. Toxic waste cleanup, and much more. In fact, we covered this the other day, and we called it the barbaric Republican spending bill. Under this spending bill, they would have cut teachers by 200,000. 200,000. Home heating assistance to the poor. Massively cut. So they all vote for this savage, barbaric, backwards bill, which absolutely guts the safety net and the administrative state. And then it didn't pass anyway. Now, by the way, I'm happy that it didn't pass. But for the love of God, Democrats, take your W and you better be cutting 1,000 different ads, hammering your opponents. the Republicans who are up for re-election in the next election, and talking about how they voted to cut 200,000 teachers. They voted to cut Meals on Wheels program for poor people. So they want poor people to starve. You absolutely should be cutting this ad because that's what this bill did. This bill was insane. It was absurd. It failed, and it's a giant political gift to the Democrats, who can absolutely clobber Republicans over the fact that they voted for these things. So, how do we end up where we are here? Where this failed, and then they had to go with basically a clean continuing resolution to fund the government, all basically just spending levels exactly the same, so Democratic priorities, but no Ukraine aid. We got here because of Matt Gaetz. Now, this is why, I've told you guys this before, at the end of every Matt Gaetz segment, I make fun of him, I laugh at him, I call him a virtue signaler, but at the end of all of it, what do I say? God bless, keep going. Now, why do I say that? Because he's a rebel with a stupid cause. So he's causing all this chaos on the right. He's going after Kevin McCarthy relentlessly. He's like, we're not going to vote for anything unless you give us an up or down vote on a balanced budget amendment. It's like he acts like he's this revolutionary and he's fighting against the establishment, but all of the priorities he wants an up or down vote on are standard, deficit hawk nonsense right-wing ideas that are not at all anti-establishment. They're incredibly pro-establishment. But I love it. And I love it because Kevin McCarthy doesn't know how to deal with this guy. So this guy, Matt Gaetz, whips up the far right into a fervor, gets them all aggressive and demanding all these different things, all the things they want. Like I said, it's like balanced budget amendment, reduce the deficit. One thing is, which is not one of his better ideas actually, is term limits. I'm like sort of agnostic on term limits, but he says we need an up or down vote on term limits before we do anything. And so the far right comes up with this spending bill, which is just the dumbest document I've ever seen and the most vicious document I've ever seen, gutting the social safety net and hurting poor people and middle-class people across this country. They have an up or down vote on it and lose. Again, giant political gift to the Democrats. And then Kevin McCarthy has to go hat in hand begging to the Democrats saying, hey, please save us. And the Democrats cut a phenomenal deal. Hey, let's keep spending levels the same. Keep it going for 45 days, and the one concession that we'll make is no Ukraine aid. Okay, and then what they're talking about now is we're going to have an up or down vote on just the Ukraine aid by itself. And it's funny because Matt Gaetz is also hammering Kevin McCarthy over that and saying, he made a deal with Democrats and didn't tell us. And it's like, well, that's standard Washington stuff. That's not like scandalous. So again, Matt Gaetz being loud, obnoxious, arrogant, wanting the spotlight, virtue signaling relentlessly, purity testing from the right, the only thing it accomplished was embarrassing Republicans into voting for a horrible bill which guts the social safety net, losing, and then having Kevin McCarthy beg Democrats to bail him out, and Democrats bailed him out in a sense on their terms. On their terms. We're not cutting anything. How about that? You want to make a deal with us? We're not cutting dick. The one thing we'll give you is Ukraine aid. Where's the downside? I see no downside here. So, look, I said it before, I'll say it again. I'm a huge fan of Matt Gaetz because he inadvertently helps the Democrats and screws the Republicans. In fact, Newt Gingrich, who I disagree with on like 99% of things, he comes out the other day and says, is Matt Gaetz like a secret agent working for the Democrats? And I'm sure there are some people who are attacking Newt over that on the right. But look, he's half right. He's not right in that this is Matt Gaetz' intent. But he is right in the sense that inadvertently, he does end up helping the Democrats. So, look, you know what this reminds me of? This reminds me of when the far-right Tea Party caucus back in the day was demanding giant cuts to Social Security and Medicare. And Obama and Boehner had a deal that had some Social Security cuts in it. But the far-right Tea Party was so extremist, they were like, we're not in favor of that deal. We want more cuts to Social Security and Medicare. And because they were so arrogant and so demanding, they ended up getting no cuts to Social Security and Medicare. It was like, not enough, never enough. And it's like, okay, well, if you're not going to accept the deal that's on the table, how about no deal, and there's no cuts to Social Security and Medicare. And that's what ended up happening. And this is a very, very similar thing. This is the far right, Matt Gaetz, inadvertently helping Democrats. So like I said, I support it. By all means, dude, keep up your crusade, keep virtue signaling, keep being a purity tester, keep being arrogant. Because it's so funny. He thinks of himself as like this hero, this revolutionary. And it's like an objective analysis of what you're doing is that you are helping the Democrats and making it so that this continuing resolution is nowhere near as bad. In fact, it's good. It's nowhere near as bad as your 30% cuts to various programs, 70% cuts, 50% cuts. So, like I said, this ended up in a roundabout way helping Democrats, and I'm here for it. And what I find hilarious is the Republicans are desperately trying to save face over this and cover their tracks, and so they're out there basically blaming Democrats, saying Democrats didn't want to do a continuing resolution. And it's like, yes, they did, and the only reason you got anything through is because you went begging to moderate Democrats who bailed your ass out, Kevin McCarthy. So it's like they have no argument at all, and all they can do is go out there and shamelessly lie about what happened here. Well, now you guys know exactly what happened here, and like I said, I hope Matt Gaetz keeps it up, because that means that the next time we come to this fight, which is going to be soon, 45 days, maybe we'll get another deal, which is on favorable Democratic terms, because Matt Gaetz is a purity testing, virtue signaling idiot who doesn't realize the consequences of his actions. Hey y'all, do me a favor and like and subscribe. It helps out big time in the algorithm. Click the bell as well for notifications when videos drop, and watch that video on screen right now. You know you want to.